So tonight we're going to be looking at the victory of Dr. Bawumia in the January 31 primaries of the MPP. We have basically split this into three. We're going to look at the context, right? So he won 56.48%. It was lower than the 61 he won in 2023, but I've discussed that already. The key issue is, what is the background to this? This is the earliest any flag bearer has been chosen in our country, right? First month of the second year. So we have 3 years to go to the election, all right? Then, of course, there's another context here, which is, this is where the current president is doing pretty well. He was named among one of the 5 most influential leaders in the world for a number of things, all right? West Africa is a very unstable place. The Sahel zone has lots of issues. There was a coup attempt in Nigeria a couple of weeks ago, another in Benin. Ghana is the doyen and the ocean, it's sort of like the island of stability in an ocean of instability. President Mahama has been voted number 5 on a global list of influential world leaders, not least because of his Accra reset, okay? So he's popular in Ghana. Some of the polls show high approval ratings. He's likely to be AU chair. And with all that he's doing at Davos, he convened an Accra reset event. A lot of people came. And of course, the economy seems to be doing very well. So Dr. Bawumia has won the MPP primaries, but to be opposition leader to a government that is doing well is an issue. And we will deal with that. So this is the first context, right? There seems to be strong, stable leadership under Mahama 2.0. And very few people doubt this, okay? Now, the other issue is that the MPP itself is suffering a dip in political fortunes, right? So 2016, 2020, 2024. Now, we've used this many times, so you understand what we're saying. If you see a deep blue, it means that MPP won this region with a strong majority. Now, what is very clear is that the electoral map of Ghana over the past 3 electoral cycles is getting greener, all right? Apart from the Ashanti region, which has maintained a deep blue, every region has changed from 2016. So in 2 electoral cycles, a whole raft of the country is very deep green. Upper East, Upper West, North, Savannah, Bono East, Oti, Volta, even Greater Accra, which MPP won in 2016, is now highly NDC. So Dr. Bawumia is taking over leadership of a party in a period where their political fortunes are dwindling very seriously, right? And let me just touch on a few points. So, for example, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 regions, 8 regions that the MPP won in 2016. They basically have only 3, all right? Eastern region was a stronghold. You can say it's not that much of a stronghold. Bono region was a stronghold. NDC has taken it, all right? Greater Accra region was 1. NDC has made it a stronghold. Western North, NDC won it, they've consolidated it. And you can say same for many. Afro region is now NDC. So the electoral map has changed. So that's the second big context that we have here. Now, as if this is not bad enough, Musa Danko has been studying changes in party affiliations. And this was December 2025 work he did, right? I just want to show you a few things here. So he's basically saying that respondents, 11,000 respondents, national sample, who claim that they are MPP between 2024 and 2025, or who self-identify, have reduced from 36 to 26%. And those who told him that they were NDC has increased from 33 to 41, right? And you notice that floating voters are also increasing, all right? But the next slide is what makes it even more serious for the MPP. Because generally speaking, MPP gets a lot of their votes from the Akan areas, right? Even among the Akan group, only 31% now claim to be MPP. And this is Musa Dankwa, December last year. NDC seems to be making an inroad in the Akan areas, if Musa is to be believed, right? So you have 36% of respondents now saying, of Akans, saying that they are NDC. Only 31 saying they are MPP in his research. And he says if this trend continues, it's going to be very disastrous for them in 4 years. Then, of course, there's a whole issue of floating voters. So you notice, even for the Akan group, the number of people who say they are floating voters is going up. So it's possible that a lot of these people may have been from here and they've moved this way. And then, of course, there are people who say they will not disclose another 12%. Okay, so the context for Bawumia is the issue of dwindling party fortunes, electoral map is not looking great, and traditional NPP voters seem not to really want to identify with the party. All right, so it's an issue for him. It seems to be an issue for him. So he's taking over at a very interesting time. Now, what is his challenge? He was vice president for 8 years. Now he's the opposition leader. NPP's constitution is very clear. If you are the flag bearer in opposition, you are the leader of the party. Okay? Of course, if you are in government, then the president becomes the leader of the party. So he's the leader of a party. And this is the first time he's leading a party like this. Because even whilst the election 2024 was going on, you can say the president was the leader. All right? So now he's leading a party which has brand issues. NDC appeared very appealing to young people in the 2024 election. If you look at the voting pattern disaggregated in some demographic areas, it's very clear that the NPP is bleeding. Some of the known faces of the party who represent it don't necessarily cover it in the greatest glory. Right? Somebody even said that right now, the NDC, there was a group of university professors who were campaigning for Mahama in 2024. MPP used to call itself the party of the intellectuals. So there seems to be some branding issues. So now he's going to be an opposition leader for a political party with a very difficult 2024 election outturn and also a lowering trend. It's not just 2024, it's coming down, right? How does he lead? This is the first time he's leading the organization. Prior to this, he was running mate. Akufo-Addo was the leader of the party. Then he was vice president. Now he's going to lead the MPP. And he has some very tough calls to make. We think there are about 4 tough calls he has to make as leader. Number 1, he needs to deal with the issue of the disunity in the party, right? The language of the campaign was vitriolic. Kwabena Japan said to us, red lines were crossed. I mean, a candidate called him a liar. Another one said, we have a candidate problem, okay? And you could tell that he was ill at ease during the peace pact signing. And when you interview these people, he wasn't very happy with the way the campaign went. It's one thing for people to come together after an election to say, we are all together, we are one happy family. But as leader of the MPP, he needs to do this. But the question is, will he reconcile or let retribution? Particularly not even for him, but his own people. Because the thing about primaries is that once a candidate wins, his henchmen also become very powerful. So the man himself may say, you know what, I'm okay with Brian. In fact, today, Brian Champon sent a statement congratulating Dr. Bawumia and committing himself to MPP and all of this. But maybe some of the people in the Bawumia camp may not necessarily be happy with Bawumia, with Brian. They may see him as a threat. All right. So, of course, he said it himself. The most important leadership challenge for Dr. Bawumia is the unity issue, particularly with these two. Again, if you put the 23 of Kennedy together with the 18 of Brian, that's about 41, 42%. Right? That's a lot. So you can say that about 40-something% of the voters do not necessarily prefer Bawumia as their leader. Of course, he's won. So that doesn't mean that they will not align. But the point we are making is that everybody will be watching how he deals with these two. All right? And everybody knows how these two also behave, right? So he's issued a statement. He says to my brother, Dr. Bawumia, I'm committed to the party and to the government. He also has considered and called Dr. Bawumia. He hasn't issued a statement yet. We don't know. So a lot hangs, and Dr. Bawumia himself has said that the disunity affected the election outcome. He said it even when the MPs went to meet him. So that's a very big leadership challenge. How do you heal the wounds? And the task is, do you reconcile or you go for retribution? Because as we said, some of the things said were very serious. So we don't know how much time he has to do this, right? Then, because MPP decided to choose their flag bearer first, it solves some problems that create others, right? Because if you choose your flag bearer last, he didn't choose who the general secretary was. He may have supported somebody, but you can't blame him. But now he's the main guy. You are going to have elections from polling stations to constituency to regional to national. People will start campaigning and say, I'm the Bawumia candidate. How do you know? How do you manage that? Are you going to say, we don't support anybody? Now, the challenge with the chairmanship is that, of course, in certain times, the leader of the party is the chairman. Okay, now think about this. Wontumi today issued a statement that he wants to run for MPP chairmanship. Ashanti Regional Chairman wants to go for national chairmanship. Okay, now you look at the Bawumia brand and you look at the Wontumi brand and you ask yourself, if Wontumi becomes MPP chair, how does that align? He's a very strong supporter of Dr. Bawumia from long, all right? Then you have Nana Komia, who's like one of his key campaign guys, who we also know is being encouraged to run for party chairman. So does he support this one? Does he support that one? Then you have this one, Boakye Jakun, who some people see to be a strong person, who they feel could be an effective leader. Indeed, some people have said one of the reasons why MPP didn't do well in 2024 is that the party had weak leadership. They blame, for example, the absence of the national chairman. We know he has not been too well. So they want a strong leader, and they point to Boakye Jakun. Will Bawumia, and by the way, he went to meet Bawumia today. They had a good embrace, they had a good chat. Will the Bawumia people want him to be chair? Will they see an Afoko situation? That Jakun is very independent. I mean, he was energy minister before. We all know part of the reasons why there was a falling out. He's seen as a strong character. Very knowledgeable, but very strong. Strong to the point of he may even challenge a certain type of thinking. And then, of course, some people see him, former general secretary, as like the compromise, right? Some people feel like he doesn't necessarily align to any side, and he's basically the guy who can bring people together. So, apart from uniting the party in terms of who the flag bearers were, he has to make a decision. And this is not just for this. General secretary, does he show his hand? Even if he's not going to show his hand, how does he? Because, look, whatever Kojo Oponkroma or Sami Ewuku or Miracle Sabuaji or Anodon does, some people will say it's Bawumia because we know, you understand, they are his people. So it's a very big issue. How do you oversee a party that's now going to do many elections? Chairman, general secretary, national organizer, treasurer, and then regional chairpersons, constituencies. It's going to be a lot. We haven't even come to parliamentary candidates and parliamentarians as well. So it's a massive challenge that he has to deal with, all right? And that's not all. Even in parliament. Yesterday, we were covering the parliamentary leadership press conference, which was jointly organized by the minority and the majority leadership. In the middle of the press conference, the minority leader said he had to leave because he says, well, his colleagues have gone to Dr. Bawumia's house. Now the question was, you are the leader of the minority. So is it that when they scheduled this meeting, you didn't know they were going? Is it that they decided they didn't tell you? So we even have a video, I don't know if you have it here, where he actually then sort of apologizes and leaves the press conference to get to Dr. Bawumia's house. And you're asking yourself, is it that because he got so many votes in his constituency or people in his constituency voted for Kennedy and he's seen as a friend of Kennedy, he's not part? Now, there are already clamors around the leadership should be changed. So what does the flag bearer do? And mind you, Afenyoman King is MP for Efutu. His deputy leader is MP for Asokwa, who happens to be the wife of Dr. K.K. Sapong, who supported Kennedy Japan. So it's like the minority leadership, his voters gave Kennedy 89%. Bawumia won here, but you see where I'm going with this, right? And then if you just see Asokori's constituents give Bawumia 91%. He's a very vocal guy. We interview him a lot. He has his own ideas. There are some who are tipping and touting that he should be made indeed, we are hearing that some people want somebody from the Ashanti region to be the minority leader. All right. How does Dr. Bawumia handle such a thing? All right. Does he keep the boat? And of course, finance minister for the last few months of Akufo-Addo gave Bawumia the highest percentage in the north, Dr. Amin. It's an economist, right? Now, if you've chosen an economist as your flag bearer, it suggests that the strength of the parties in economy. Are you going to then say, let our front bench have finance and economic people? Because this is a lawyer, right? So these are very, very interesting issues, right? Does Dr. Bawumia take a position? Does he just say, let's allow things to remain the way they are? He may have to issue a statement because the speculation is a lot. All right. Does he have a role for the 4 people who challenged him? Will there be, and by the way, February 22nd was when these two, in 2024, were made majority leader and deputy. So Che Mensah left the position 2 years ago of majority leader. And then, of course, after the election, they sort of continued as minority leader. So you can say he's been leading the parliamentary group for 2 years. Do people want a reshuffle? The flag bearer has to decide. So does he retain or does he do a reshuffle? Then there's, of course, there's a big one. You know, if you listen to the campaign, it was a difficult campaign for Bawumia because how do you take credit for Akufo-Addo's success and then you repudiate his failures? You get it? Because it was a mixed bag, especially if you look at the first 4 years. I mean, COVID time, people like Akufo-Addo was on top. The way he led the nation at COVID, fellow Ghanaians, great success. COVID comes, whatever happens, Russia, Ukraine, the rest of it, and it's downhill. Debt exchange. Now they say sack the finance minister. I don't want to do it. DDEP, no haircuts. I mean, a whole lot of things, right? So what does he do? Is he, of course, he didn't vote, or we didn't see him voting, so which suggests that he's trying to be neutral. How does Dr. Bawumia manage the Akufo-Addo legacy? Because, by the way, some people think the MPP lost so badly because of the way Akufo-Addo governed. Other people think the MPP lost so badly because of who Dr. Bawumia is. And I'm talking about the lead reason. There are many reasons why you lose elections, right? So, when he talks to delegates, he says, we lost because our people didn't vote. When you listen to what he says to delegates, he says, we lost because Mahama didn't get a net increase in votes by any. It was our people who didn't vote. So is he basically saying that it wasn't because Akufo-Addo was not perceived to be a bad leader or that his government was not that bad. It was just our people didn't vote. If your people didn't vote, why didn't they vote? Were they apathetic because they didn't like you or they didn't like his policies or both? Right? And these are questions he will face. So does he embrace the Akufo-Addo legacy and say, look, this party was built by hard-working people, Akufo-Addo, and I stand by everything Akufo-Addo did? Or I am responsible for everything, or I'm the mate, and therefore it's going to be complicated. And a lot of Ghanaians would want a lot more clarity. So this is more to the Ghanaians. Of course, when you listen to him during the campaign for primaries, when you are talking to delegates, you know what to say, right? You're not going to blame your boss in front of delegates necessarily. You have to encourage. But talking to delegates in primaries is different from talking to Ghanaians. And it's just a year and a half or whatever that the election was done, December 2024. So it's a lot of maybe 14 months, right? How does he deal with this this large shadow? How does he deal with this shadow that he confronts? So we're basically analyzing the challenge Dr. Bawumia faces as a leader. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we're going to do something very interesting. We're going to propose 4 possible matchup scenarios, right? Because don't forget, until Saturday, nobody knew who was going to be the flag bearer. So even NDC, I'm sure there were some who were like, if Kennedy wins, this person is better. If Bawumia wins, this person is better. All right? Or if somebody else wins. And so now that he's won, how does that change the calculus of NDC in terms of who their front runners are and how the possible, because Mahama is not going to do a 3rd term. He said that the law doesn't agree. So basically, NDC is going to have a new candidate. And this is somebody who's known. We'll deal with that when we come back. And we also have a few pieces of advice on how to navigate those murky waters. This is the point of view. It's a 2-in-1. This is our editorial. When we come back after the editorial, we'll speak to 2 professors as well on prophecies, prophetic unction in elections. Stay with us. So tonight, we're basically analyzing what the Dr. Bawumia flag bearership win for MPP means for him. He obviously has to lead He has tough decisions to make in uniting the party. He needs to decide what to do with, particularly because Kwabena Agyapong and Dr. Educhum seem to already sort of align, right? And the campaign they did was of a different nature, okay? He has to decide how to go about the elections, the issue of who takes over from, or whether there's going to change the leadership in the minority at all is an issue. And of course, the looming question of the Akufo-Addo legacy. Now, there are people who say that if Kennedy Agyapong had won the election, a different type of person would have become favorite in NDC, because Kennedy Agyapong is seen as a maverick. So for a lot of the political elite, Dr. Bawumia is seen as the safe choice. So like the establishment choice. Kennedy is seen as a maverick. And that a lot of people in NDC said if Kennedy Agyapong had won, the kind of person they would have wanted to lead them may have been different. Right? Because now that Dr. Bawumia is the flag bearer, of course, there are about 4 lead names. Again, we are using the research of Global Info Analytics. The 4, he is the chairman of the party, former general secretary. He's done a thank you tour. And he seems to be very strong among NDC people, right? He's not lost any election. He's run in the NDC. General secretary, 2004, 5, he's won all. Very formidable, very popular among the grassroots. But the question is, now that he has won, how does that influence the way NDC delegates see him? Because in our view, if he gets the flag bearership, it will be a battle of contrasts, right? When you listen to General Mosquito, very street smart, highly intelligent, downplays Buklong, right? So he doesn't present himself as an academic. He will fear Nyansa. Now, that doesn't mean he's not smart. He used to be Deputy Agric Minister. He's a very intelligent person. But it's a very contrasting picture you have, because the way people perceive Dr. Bawumia, former African Development Bank, economics professor, and General Mosquito is a politician's politician, right? Now, will the NDC present him? If they do, what does that mean? How does that influence the narrative? By the way, we are many years ahead from the election. We have 2026 to finish. We haven't even started it well. 2027 hasn't come. 2028 hasn't come. So all these are scenarios, right? The polls will change. But the point we're making is, if eventually he wins, whichever way the cookie crumbles, is going to be a contrast of styles, a contrast of backgrounds, a contrast of emphasis, a contrast of perception. And it's going to be a very stark choice, right? The question will be for a lot of floating voters, where do they want to go? How will NDC delegates perceive a potential matchup between General Mosquito and Dr. Bawumia? I leave that to your imagination. Then there's this. Now, the reason we brought this in is, again, the polls, particularly Musa, is showing very high numbers for this gentleman. And it's not surprising, right? And let me explain something before I go back to this. So, for example, today, the Ghana Statistical Service announced the inflation figure. Inflation is 3.8%. It's the lowest in 30 years, right? Think about it. Since 1990-something, inflation is the lowest in 30 years. And of course, when the fundamentals go bad, the finance ministry is blamed. Indeed, even in the MPP, if people like Adjo Asafo, they say it was the finance minister who destroyed the economy, not Dr. Bawumia. So it means that when the economy goes well, the finance minister that takes the credit. It's that simple, right? So even when you listen to the debates in the MPP primaries, they're saying that, well, you can't blame the vice president for the economy because it was the finance minister. So if the economy goes well, check this out. Dr. Bawumia famously said, if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. Guess what? Ghana's currency makes historic yearly gain against the dollar. And this is close of 2025. More than 40%. Is the first, when you take the year, first annual increase of the cedi against the dollar to close a year since 1994. Guys, that's 32 years. So in fact, some people feel like with the choice of Dr. Bawumia, it sort of plays into this guy because he's not said he wants to be president. He's just doing his job, right? But he's holding the bag. And he's very powerful. If you talk to, look, we're interviewing a minister who was saying like, sometimes they go to the Ministry of Finance to just lobby that payments be made because once you have the bag, you have the keys. All right? So does this victory mean that NDC delegates will start saying, look, if the economy keeps doing well, if we push this guy, what does he have to say? Right? Because the CD, it got to, I don't know, whatever, 14, 15 under Dr. Bawumia or the MPP, right? He's brought it to a stable between 10 and 12. And it stayed in that band for almost 8 months. Okay? Of course, the question is, can they sustain it? But imagine if they did for another year. Imagine if the city was still between 10 and 12. And imagine if the economy kept growing. Imagine if they start doing the big push and the roads start coming. Because don't forget, when you pick your presidential candidate early, you don't know what the election will be about. You don't know whether it's an election on economy, or it's an election on corruption, or on security. But you've already chosen your guy. And your guy is economy. He's economy for 8 years. He's digital, but more economy. Even digital is economy, right? So in a strange way, his choice has brought him to the fore. It will be interesting to see what the polls say. So maybe we'll talk to Musa next week and ask him, you've been polling up to January. Now that he's been chosen, does this change the calculus for this guy? He hasn't said he wants to be president. But his name keeps coming up. He's a 46, 47-year-old from the central region. And for some reason, the NDC keeps giving central region, right? Males. And then now you have the vice president from the central region, which brings me to my third point. All right? So now you have... So if this is the race, it's an economy race. All right? Now, she hasn't said she wants to be president. So all of what we are doing is based on polling and anecdotal evidence, but it's important for the context, right? She's a vice president. He's been vice president for 8 years. So if for some reason the NDC decides that, look, we want continuity. We don't want any fight. We don't want General Mosquito versus Haruna Idrisu anything. We just want Mahama to continue, or Mahama is, what do you call it? His terms tied. So we want his vice president to ascend for a seamless continuity. So no gidi primaries beer. How does that change the calculus? First woman versus first Muslim, both vice presidents, right? 8 years as vice, 4 years as vice. Do you compare the records? So will she say, compare my 4 years as his Muhammad's number 2 to his 8 years and Akufo-Addo and make a choice? All right? First woman VC of a university. She was education minister as well. So this is a very different race. It's a bit like Obama versus Hillary, right? First black versus first woman. It's nobody knows. And by the way, because her team hasn't said anything about her interest, it appears he's doing very low in the polls. A lot of the polls we see doesn't even come up at all. But we need to say that when you see how she's leading, for example, last 2 weeks, Transport Ministry, she's gone to many places and she's very, she's working a lot. Not campaigning, but she's working. She's doing the leadership work. So we don't know, right? Then there's also this one. I think it's serious. So there's this one. This one, because, I mean, we know Haruna Idrisu, right? MP for Tamale South, a very interesting political figure, education minister. Some are even touting that he should be sent to defense. Right? Haruna has been there, done that, has a t-shirt. Very influential in the north. I think I saw a video of Suhini talking about him, thanking him. He has a lot of sway, even among non-NDC northern politics. So if this were the matchup we were to get, Wale Wale versus Tamale South, Mamprusi versus Dagomba, North, it will be very interesting. All right? Because don't forget that the map we showed you earlier, nobody can doubt the fact that the votes NPP gets in the north over the past 3 or 4 electoral cycles has increased because of him. Okay. So how does bringing him affect that? All right, how does bringing him affect that? We've already shown you the account numbers. How does bringing him affect that? So this is our analysis. The choice of this man disadvantages him. This is first point. Disadvantages him because if it was this guy, then people would have said, whoa, this guy is on way, so let's get somebody who can match him, right? So again, we haven't spoken to anybody necessarily in the team, but from all the analysis we've done, if he had won, this guy would have been like, hey, Charlie, a very serious. So in a sense, the Bawumia victory sort of has dampened this because it's like, Charlie, you know, Ghanaians, Bukulong people, hey, professor of economics, and the way they will do it, of course, he can hold his own in any debate, but we're saying it will not be the same type of race, particularly for the undecided and the middle class voters. It's going to be very difficult. So if it was this guy, he would have been in pole position. So our prediction is that because it's Bawumia, this gentleman seems to be the logical choice, at least for now, because of the way the economy is going. Okay? Because of the way the economy is going. And if the NDC succeeds in managing the economy well, he has a problem. Right? And I think they want to make the election an economy election. If the things go south, then, because this is his forte, right? So if the economy goes extremely bad, he knows his economics. So even though people accuse him of not being that influential under Akufo-Addo, he can say, look, now I'm in the helm. I'm the head of I'm in charge. And I've done economics. But it depends on how this guy behaves. This one, we don't know. Because the team is keeping their cards close to their chest. All right? Some see it as the safe Mahama transition choice because they don't want confusion in the NDC. And of course, this is an interesting one because there are also, for example, Apenyomakin alleges that there's a plan to make her the flag bearer and make him the running mate. Right? According to Apenyomakin, if it's to be believed, he said it, I think it was in the open, that there's a plan to make the vice president the flag bearer and Haruna the running mate. How does that affect this calculus? All right. Now, we are going to conclude by saying a few things. We think, of course, just quickly before I go there, September, according to Musa Dankwa, NDC voters, it's funny, NDC voters say they want Bawumia to win the MPP primaries. And at the time, MPP voters say they want General Mosquito to win the primaries. So this was what they said in September. Can you imagine? Of course, it's September. So this Musa Dankwa poll, September last year, NDC people said they want him to win. And MPP people said they want him to win. So they may get the race, who knows? Edu Yutamaklo posted on Facebook, the MPA boss, head of legal, he said they were expecting him to win. They were expecting him to win. So I take it that NDC sort of knows what to do with him, but NDC wasn't sure what to do with this guy. Right? So I can imagine a sigh of relief when he didn't win because, hey, Charlie, Akwawe there some way. Of course, some would have said if he wins, we have a strategy, okay? Now, the other interesting point is that 31st December poll, according to Musa, Atuforsen leads both men. All right? But this is December 2025. Election is in December 2028. All right? So it's very long. Let me conclude. For him to do what he has to do, the message he tells delegates is not the same message he tells Ghanaians. You can tell delegates that we lost because you didn't turn out to vote. But you have to be upfront to Ghanaians. And he has to admit the failures of the previous administration. And he has to figure out how to do it. We don't know how he's going to do that. Because what delegates are looking for in a flag bearer may not be what the rest of the population, particularly the floating voters, will be looking for. So he has a challenge there. Now, jobs are the most important thing for any economy, particularly for Ghana. And if you look at the unemployment figures, around 34% for youth. He needs to start talking about or thinking about a credible plan for job creation. Right? Jobs will always be important. So whatever happens in the economy next year, macroeconomy, whatever, if people don't have work to do, they are not happy. Number 3, NDC's own behavior. If NDC decides to throw all caution to the wind and start doing campaign like fighting each other, it opens the door because it's not very common to win when you challenge an incumbent in the first 4 years. But this incumbent is going to be a different person than Mahama. So he will see that he has an opportunity there. And of course, in our world, anything can happen. The way Trump is behaving, you know, touch wood, if there's another world war, who knows what that will mean for gold, cocoa. African economies are very fragile, right? So if the economy, by some accident of global events, becomes tragically poor, he can say, look, I know what to do. We don't know. These are our ideas. These are just our thoughts for the implications of a Bawumia flag bearership. Early days yet. Early days yet. When we come back, I'll speak to two professors on why so many prophets are prophesying about elections. And it appears that is eroding the trust of the public in religious leaders. Stay with us. Welcome back. So we're still in the post-MPP primaries mood. And one of the big issues that have come up is the issue of prophecies. So we know that about at least 10 different people gave prophecies around who was going to win the election. And well, after the election, one of them had to issue a statement to even take a break from the pulpit and apologize and all of this. And this is not the first time prophets have had a go at elections. They've been doing this for a number of years. It's gotten more and more serious now. I'll be speaking to Professor Fred Janku, who is an associate professor of development economics at ISE, and also Professor Joseph Osafo, who is the director of the Center for Aging Studies, University of Ghana, and a psychologist. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you for having us.
Let me show the audience some of the prophets who prophesied before the election. This is not a full list. So we have Prophet Eric Boahin Uche. He prophesied a Bawumia victory. He got it right. Prophet, did I say professor or prophet? Prophet, forgive me, it's the same.
Be sure you don't confuse that.
I'm telling you. Prophet Roger Samuel Henry, he predicted Bawumia as well. Prophet William Braham, sounds like an American prophet of the past, also prophesied Bawumia. Prophet Telvin Sowa Ajay prophesied Bawumia. Prophet Elijah Kofi King, Bawumia. Prophet Nigel Gazy, Bawumia. Prophet Emmanuel Walasi, Bawumia. There's Prophet Bernard Nelson Eshen, Kenejepong. There were a couple others who prophesied Kenejepong. Their names don't come to mind readily. I listened to another one. I think he gave a conditional prophecy. Okay, let me start, Professor Osafo. I know you as a Church of Pentecost. Are you an elder or a pastor?
Bernard.
Yeah, are you an elder or a pastor at Church of Pentecost?
I'm a pastor.
Wonderful.
I'm a pastor in Pentecost.
So you're a pastor, you're an academic. So some people pitch this as when religion meets science. And they say Musa Dankwa is correct, religion is wrong. Of course, at least 9 of the prophets got it right. But as a pastor, as a psychologist, and an academic, are you concerned that increasingly our politics is being dominated by prophecies? Is it a concern for you?
Very much of a concern, Bernard. You know, was it last year? Yeah, that should be last year, I should think so. I gave a public lecture on the role of religion in contemporary Ghana, especially within the space of mental health. And in that lecture, and that was I think Professor B. Foster Memorial Lectures organized by Mental Health Authority Ghana. I indicated in that lecture that a few things are coming up in Ghana that is of a concern. And one of the issues I raised was the preponderance of relying on prophetic decrees than on scientific data. That was a real challenge. And one of the reasons why I said so was because, you see, anytime a group of people switch from looking at issues of life, living, the human condition, from a scientific perspective and only examine it through the lens of religion, in the realms of subjectivities, then you have a lot of issues to contend with, because then, Bernard, what you will say to me is that I feel, I think, which is not based on data, it's based on your subjectivities, your feelings, what you think. And once we subject ourselves to people's subjectivity in terms of what they think, what they feel, then others can wade into that space and take advantage of us and abuse people. So it's a problem. And I remember also indicating that currently, if you look at Ghana, one of the dangerous, I call it psycho-religious attitude that is emerging is this whole idea of an interventionist, modus operandi. That is to say that when I have a problem, I need an interventionist to mediate between me and the numinous. And by numinous, I'm talking about the spirituals. So for any challenge at all, I'm looking for an interventionist, somebody who claims that he has epistemic control, he has authority to wade into the realms of the supernatural and to discern, to decode what God is saying and to tell me what to do. Now, if that becomes the issue, then anybody at all can say, all right, I felt some way, I've seen something and God is telling me A, B, C. And I thought that we have to be careful as a nation that issues of national concern, for example, disasters, when people say that I had a dream or I have had a dream or a vision and I see a disaster. And then the next thing you see is that they are on in their churches just saying it. How do you manage that? How do you take an issue of such serious national concern and just say it without, for example, not having the courtesy to call on disaster management institutions?
So let me get you straight. Let me get you straight. You are not saying that God doesn't speak. You are talking about how it's handled, because you know
exactly.
You and I are Christians, and the Bible says the Lord God does nothing except he reveals it first to his servant the prophet. And this is one of the scriptures that prophets quote a lot. So we do know that there is prophecy. So I want to establish that point first. So are you saying that in contemporary times God doesn't reveal what he's doing, or you're talking about how the people who get the revelation handle it and manage it? Let's be clear.
Bernard, clear, and thanks for that. For asking for that clarity. The scriptures are clear on that. Prophets, men of God, and sort of interventionists have littered biblical history. They serve as guidance. They want kings. They want families. They called leaders to accountability. They even, some of the times, waded into political affairs. Don't forget the story of Isaiah who went to King Ezekiel in 2 Kings chapter 19 and told him. This was when he was faced with a threat from the Assyrian empire. And Ezekiel sought God's guidance. And Isaiah went and gave Ezekiel God's perspective on the matter. So it's clear. Sometimes they even declared divine judgment. They predicted political change. I remember the story of Ahab, and how Elijah declared that Ahab's house would come down because of the kind of behavior his household and his leadership was exposed to. So God speaks, and for every generation, God will speak and will continue to speak. The problem is, how do we manage what God is saying? And how are we sure that the voices we are hearing are actually the voice of God? That's where the challenge is. And my contention is that if you live in a context like ours, where the public space is really fused with a lot of religious, content. Then, of course, you are opening yourself up to all kinds of persons who may come and say, God has spoken to me. But don't forget that we are living in a context where religious content and religious practices are everywhere. Anybody at all can get up and then start singing songs, holding the Bible, and then people will say, oh, God has spoken to the person.
All right.
And that is the mouth of God for the time. So I'm not saying that prophecies are not important and that they have no role at all in national issues. They do. But the issue is, how do you manage what God has said? And indeed, did God really speak to you?
Wonderful. Let me come to Professor Fred Janku. Prof, you sent me some data suggesting that trust in religious leaders in Ghana has fallen sharply. And you give a 10-year window, and you're saying that it's actually worse among Christian and traditional religious leaders, not so much for Muslim leaders. I wanted you to walk me through those slides you sent me to explain how serious this is, and you sort of linked it to this prophetic, you call it prophecy becomes politics, trust collapses. Can you walk me through that?
Okay. Thank you, Bernard, for having me. I want to cast this issue a bit more broadly in the context of trust in institutions, and that's important for a number of reasons. So the belief that an institution will act competently, fairly, and in line with, if you like, shared norms and expectations is normally what is defined as institutional trust. And so you have the word competence there. Can the institution do what it claims it will do? You have the issue of integrity. Does it follow its own rules and moral standards? These are two important keywords. And when this issue of the prophecies came up, I decided to, as a researcher at ISE, I decided to look at the data. So I picked the Afrobarometer surveys, and I wanted to look at a period of 10 years, so 2014 and 2024. And I found that Ghana is facing actually a broad crisis of trust. So the Afrobarometer data shows that over the past decade, confidence in our institutions, be it political, court, police, public bodies, religious bodies, has declined very sharply. In fact, Ghana has lost most of the institutional trust that it had a decade ago. Overall, you would see that institutional trust in Ghana has collapsed by almost 90% relative to the levels they were in 2014. So that's a serious issue. Now, if you narrow, so that context is important, and I must emphasize that. Now, if you narrow down to religious institutions, which is what we are talking about, religious institutions have traditionally been one of the most trusted parts of our Ghanaian society. But they have been pulled along this collapse of institutional trust. And when I looked at the data, I saw that strong trust in religious leaders has fallen by about a quarter in a decade, right? And that's serious. But when I look across the religious groups, the three main ones, I find that whereas when you take Muslims, trust in their religious leaders went up marginally between 2014 and 2024 in a decade, that for Christians and traditional, religious people, traditional religious leaders has fallen very sharply. Which is a matter of concern. Then I began to look at what is accounting for this, right? What is accounting for this, at least as we can explain from the data. And it's striking that this is not being driven by, youth. You can say maybe secularism, urbanization, and so people are turning to more scientific or data-driven, analytical ways or ways of thinking, but it's not. It's not being driven by secularism or the youth. It's not being driven by education. It's not being driven by social media. but it's happening both in rural and urban areas. But the fall in rural Ghana is higher, and the fall also among the economically stressed Ghanaians is higher. Now, this is striking because these are the very group that would tend to rely on religious leaders, right? The poor, the vulnerable, people in rural areas in general, or poor people in general. And so if the trust is falling faster among these people, it should be telling us something.
Let's take it one by one before you conclude.
Yeah.
So, Christian religious leaders, those who trust them, fell from 42% in 2014, 30% in 2017 to 28%. Now, is this trust among adherents or the general public?
So this data was collected from the general public. It's a national representative survey, so it's more for the general public, right?
Wow.
But what we are doing there is to take those who claim that they are Christians, and those who claim that they are Muslims, and those who claim that they are traditional believers, and to look at what are their levels of trust for religious leaders.
In their leaders, in their religious leaders, or in other religious leaders?
So the question being asked about your religious leaders, but it asks about religious leaders.
Generally, okay. So for the Muslim faithful, they are 41% said they trusted in religious leaders in 2014.
In 2014,
it was 41.
Once you in 2014, once you adjust for, so there are many factors that can account for this, right? So what we are talking about is not just, so we are accounting for where people live, we are accounting for their backgrounds, we are accounting for other factors that may be influencing their educational level, that may be influencing this trust. Once you account for that, in 2014, about 37% of Muslims said they had strong trust for religious leaders. That went up marginally in a decade to about 40%. But when you take the Christian group, right, trust for religious leaders, after accounting for other factors that may influence what they are telling you, in 2014, 38% said they have strong trust for religious leaders, and that fell to 24% in a decade.
Wow.
38% to 24%.
Wow.
And similarly, if you take those who say they adhere to traditional beliefs, it fell from 39% to 19%. I mean, that's striking because it tells me something, although anecdotal, that these are the groups that believe somewhat in predictions of the supernatural, these kinds of supernatural experiences that we are talking about. And they are the same group that within whom trust is falling very rapidly within 10 years, within a decade.
I'll come back to you to explain the cause, because you believe that some of these prophetic practices could be responsible. But Professor Osafo, what do you say to this? This is serious, right? 38.
No, it is.
I mean, people are not trusting their religious leaders again. And as a religious leader yourself, you should be concerned, right?
I am. Fred is scaring me.
No.
But
go ahead.
The point, the point Fred is making, I mean, that the data is very, very, very interesting to look into that data. And, Fred, Bernard, I'm sure you have read a bit of the works of Bua, the art historian.
F.K. Bua.
F.K. Bua, in one of his books, indicated that when you come to Ghana, religious leaders are one of the most revered groups in Ghana. And it's the reason why, if you are looking for gatekeepers in any community programming, you don't want to, for example, include them in what we are doing. Over the period, so many things, I'm happy Fred is indicating that even if you control for all other contributing factors, you still can see that the data is still a solid one. So many factors and so many things have happened in the past. And Bernard, if you haven't forgotten, gone were the days not too long ago, maybe about 2 decades, between 10 to about 2 decades. As a psychologist, I remember, for example, in those days, being consulted for so many things which were quite derogatory about religious leaders. For example, religious leaders who were taking advantage of young people, young ladies, people's wives, children. I mean, this was in the media almost every week. This was happening. And sometimes, as a clinician, church families will consult you and they will tell you what has happened. Again, beyond that, in psychological sciences, we have something we call spiritual crisis. Now, a spiritual crisis is simply when your knowledge about God, about the divine, about the numinous, does not resonate with your experiences. So, for example, you say you have known, you've been taught by your pastors that God is faithful, that God opens a door, that God heals, that God will destroy your enemies. All of this triumphant, teaching messages that we often hear. And yet, God heals, but you are sick. God opens door, but you don't have a job. Yet though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. But now you are afraid of my evil. So I saw the past 2 decades that spiritual crisis was on the rise. And if you know my area of professional practice is suicidology, I look at persons also who are very suicidal. And one of the things I saw was that people were becoming suicidal because of spiritual crisis. They are frustrated. They've been prayed over and over again, and they haven't seen any, so-called breakthrough. So again, the preponderance on triumphal theology, which is to say that God will cause you to break through everything in life, I believe might be accounting for what we are seeing. That over the period, people have seen that, look, at a point in life, you have to pick up your life and then trust God for it. Work hard and see what will happen. And not to put your trust in religious leaders. I see that is what is happening now. People are now beginning to question authorities. The commitment to if you like, the crux and the epicenters of religious institutions are beginning to fade.
I see.
So, for example, yes, that's what I'm saying. For example, somebody, when we were young, people will not travel. Not too long ago, people may not travel without even informing their religious leaders. These days, I see that is changing. And then we have been very concerned about, if you have followed that, you saw that there have been extensive debate on even offerings that are taken in churches. One of them happened to be tithing, for example. So it appears that people are beginning to question orthodoxy, and they are questioning certain issues which have been accepted in the past. And they could be accounting for some of this that we are seeing.
Good. Let me
just lack of trust.
Yeah, let me just wrap this up with Professor Janku on the issue of rural versus urban and also social media. One would have thought that trust is eroding more among urban dwellers than rural dwellers, and also that social media could be driving loss of trust in religious leaders. It appears that the data doesn't show the two.
Yeah, that was my expectation as well. And having listened to Prof. Safo, it makes it clearer why I'm seeing what I'm seeing in the data. Because it speaks to the very, issues that you are raising, that you would expect that, if you see anybody sees this data, you'll say, oh, it's, the urban, secularism, social media, people like the story of Europe, for example, that were very religious. And as they develop secularism, very few people in Europe and many parts of that part of the world now, go to church or any kind of religious activity, right? So you would think that's what's driving it. But the data is saying no. Trust is falling across board, but more so, or is falling faster among the vulnerable, right? That's the story. It's falling faster among the vulnerable. So if you take the rural people and people who are economically stressed, right? They are the ones among whom the trust is falling faster. Of course, the trust was lower to begin with among urban people in general compared to rural people. So the collapse of trust in religious leaders is not being driven by urban secularism. It's being driven by deep, what I'll call disillusionment in among people who are poor, because they are the same people who seek, help the most from these religious leaders. And if their experiences do not conform to what they expect, then they are more likely to lose trust faster than those who are less engaged with religious leaders. I mean, I give you a typical example. Where I go to church, there was a church behind us where, people saw on TV how they were promising miracle money, promising all kinds of things. And they came from, I won't mention the region, but a certain region in Ghana. These women came, and when they came after church, they didn't see what they were promised on TV, and they didn't even have transportation money to go back where they came from. We had to give them money to go back. So, and these are people who are coming from rural areas, far away. So what do you think? I mean, such people what would they say about their trust in religious authority?
All right, we have a minute to end this segment. Professor Safo, should the church be the one to lead the reform, or should the state get involved?
That's a very tough one there. But let me see how I navigate this. Well, I think that on two levels. One of them is that the church should have the ability for self-reflection. If there is any, maybe not ability, but it should have the humility, I should put it that way. It should have the humility for self-reflection. The church should start judging itself. Where have we slipped? Where have we made mistakes? Where have we not fared well? And then begin the correction. For example, there is this deep sense of search and desire for authority that I see sometimes in the body of Christ, where people see spiritual leaders as very authoritative to the extent that when they share a thought, you can't share counter thoughts. And over the period, there have been this kind of excessive, kowtowing to religious leaders. And that is not to say that we don't give due respect to church leaders. But, it sends a message to members and to people that sometimes religion denies people the ability to use their rationality. And so the church must begin to reflect on these things, especially New Testament church is the priesthood of believers. So how can we as pastors serve humbly without taking advantage of our members? That's the first thing. Once we begin to judge ourselves, and then I know in the scriptures, when God was talking to the 7 churches, he wanted them to begin the reflection of repentance for themselves. You should reflect, see where the challenges are, and then you trigger a button for repentance. Then the second thing is that I think where it gets beyond what the church can do, because always, in account we say, if you be a mensa, there are others who be outliers, who break the rules. Can the state now take advantage? Or not advantage, but can the state crack the whip? As you know what is happening in, for example, Rwanda, those who call themselves pastors, what are their qualifications? Bernard, this is my argument. As a psychologist, it took me about 7 to 8 years before I began practicing as a psychologist. I am supposed to renew my license and to add value to my knowledge so I can give the best of service to my clientele. When a medical doctor needs to go through training, he goes through almost similar years. And they work on the body. I work on emotions, so to speak, psyche or the soul. We are all trained and disciplined to do this. You will not be allowed to do it, to work if you don't submit yourself to such rigorous
All
training.
right.
I don't understand why, finally, I don't understand why those who work on a human spirit, and humans are actually tripartite. Why don't we the state. Why don't we regulate anybody who comes up and says, I'm a pastor? How long has he been trained? Who has he been submitted? Has he submitted himself to? Where has he done, some internship? These are very critical questions to ask.
All right.
And I don't think we should have a problem in asking that. Tell us who trained you and how you have been trained. So let me run on this one. So I think that, yes, the church should self-regulate. But where it gets beyond the church and there are others who are breaking the rule, the state could step in and call those who ought to be called to order.
Thank you very much, Professor Joseph Osafo, who is a psychologist. He is also the director of the Center for Aging Studies, University of Ghana. We also spoke to Professor Fred Janku, who is a development economist at the ISER in Legon. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insights. This is still the point of view. We'll be right back with more. Don't go away. So it's a wrap. We started off with, of course, this editorial around what Bawumia's victory means for NDC and 2028, with just, of course, 3 years to the election. Thank you so much for watching tonight's edition of the show. We also spoke to Professor Joseph Osafo, who is a psychologist and the head of the Center for Aging Studies. And we also spoke to Professor Fred Janku of ISER on the role of prophecies and how it's affecting perceptions about religious leaders. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.